Let's get to the news. All right. So first up this week, we have to talk about Tulsi Gabbard. So Tulsi made headlines this past week by announcing her departure from the Democratic Party. So she basically, put out a video and a big sort of Twitter thread saying, "I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that is now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness who divide us by racializing every issue and stoke anti-white racism, actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms." And then she says towards the end, putting us into World War III. So this was kind of a big deal. And to be honest, it was one of those things where I thought it was like kind of par of the course. Like she's been talking like this for a little while now, and she's always been kind of the oddball out on the Democratic Party. Even when she ran, I was like, she's the most sensible of the bunch. She won't last long. And, here we are 2 years later. So anyway, what I thought was interesting, right, and what kind of takes this from being a pretty interesting story to like a pretty, I would say, powerful story is a related one that came out of Bronx, New York. So the AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was giving a town hall, and she got interrupted by two sort of independent left-wing activists who basically called her out and says, "Look, Tulsi Gabbard has shown guts where you have shown cowardice. Okay, you're the liar here." Right? You are the one bringing us into World War III. Congresswoman, none of this matters unless there's a nuclear war, which you voted to send arms and equipment to Ukraine. Tulsi, she left the Democratic Party because they're war hawks, right? Look, you originally voted, you ran as an outsider, yet you've been voting to start this war in Ukraine. You're voting to start a third world war with Russia and China. So this was actually like a kind of an unexpected development, to be honest. And there seems to be a connection, right? Like these guys, I think, were emboldened and encouraged, at least in part, by Tulsi Gabbard and her kind of her story and her resignation, if you would, or departure from the Democratic Party. So that was like a really interesting kind of closure to this. Here towards the end, he added, "I call her out for being a coward in the face." So her being AOC. "In the face of the party that will push us all into nuclear war right now, will she stand up like Tulsi and fight for peace?" So really, really interesting. I think this is waking a lot of people up. I actually looked up one of these two guys online, Jose Vega. He was one of the two protesters. And he's like, he appears to be like, yes, like an activist, but he's also like an independent kind of left winger. So he has these things in his bio: exonerate LaRouche, and then Sare for Senate, which is talking about this like New York independent woman. I think her name is Diane, who's running for Senate in New York against Chuck Schumer, right? So she's, at least anti-establishment. I didn't even know that these Democrats, or I guess independents, still existed, right? Given the group thing between the progressives and the establishment Dems. So this was just a kind of a huge story and kind of put Tulsi on the map and sort of AOC and this whole kind of democratic regime situation on kind of the spotlight here. I think Tulsi ended up going on Joe Rogan and explaining her position. She went on Tucker Carlson and explained her position and really answered questions. So very, very good stuff, honestly. And it feels like a nice timing, right? A few weeks ahead of the November election to really like make her position known. Tim Pool criticized her rightfully for endorsing Joe Biden back in 2020 or during the election cycle. So it's she's not perfect basically, but at least she's being forthcoming and steadfast in her positions and principled enough to take the heat that's coming along with it. Okay, so next up we have to talk a little bit about Portland. So Portland is an interesting situation. As you may know, the 2020 sort of riots around George Floyd, there's kind of a lot of epicenters, right? One was like, Chaz, around the Seattle area. There was Minneapolis itself where George Floyd got, or lost his life, I should say. And then you have places like Portland, which were just literally on fire for 100 days of rioting or something like that. And it's been interesting because the incumbent city commissioner is getting crushed. I mean, she's getting absolutely like destroyed by the challenger. This person, I guess, Renee Gonzalez, something like 49% in favor of Gonzalez compared to 22% in favor of this woman Joanne Hardesty. And it was interesting. They had a debate this past Thursday, and then one of the things that I thought was like kind of interesting is um, Joanne is questioned basically by this like veteran who comes out, and I guess he submitted like a FOIA request on her and basically said, "Look, your military service record is fake. It's a sham." Um, I think it exists. It's just like it's just dramatically overblown, compared to what she has stated publicly. So she's basically a fraud, and her educational credentials are basically fraudulent as well. Says this guy. She claims to have graduated from some college. Record says that is not the case either. So really, really interesting. So much so that the Congress, or excuse me, the commissioner woman stormed out of the meeting, just live on camera the other day. So that was really amazing. This lady seems to be just like not only a fraudulent person, but an also like just a kind of an all around bad actor. So Andy No, he basically says, she was the defund the police kind of member. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Who really, was like pushing that very hard. She called the cops on her Lyft driver for leaving the window open, and she's here at some casino where she gambles a lot. So hey, are you on the clock for that? Like, what's going on? Could you be using your time to better serve taxpayers? Like, she's just using this to, I think, enrich herself in some way and do as little as possible for her constituents, right? And then she claims that this area where she's gambling at this casino is like a racist area. So very similar to that woman from BLM, Patrice Cullors, right? Oh, white people are so racist. Let me move into their neighborhood and buy a big mansion there because I feel safer there. Yeah, okay. And then Joanne, she also was allied with Antifa, apparently, according to Andy No. So like this is the person who was doing all the like the training and stuff around like Antifa members. So she's been an awful person, right? Defund the police, blah, 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 which has contributed to like the rising crime, right? And then it says here, now she's expressing outrage over the fact that people are hiring private security. So it just kind of goes on and on. It's crazy to think that she was even like elected, to be honest. And just how like screwed up this whole city has been. But it looks like they're finally, like very quietly, you might say, seeing the error of their ways these past number of years, I guess since 2018 or whatever she was elected, and are trying to make things right, which is why you have like 27% lead of this Renee guy. So definitely something to watch there. Maybe in a month or so, Renee will be in office, and there will be hope for Portland. Yeah. Obviously, if things don't work out that way, then it's just going to continue to crumble. Okay. So next up, I have to talk a little bit about Herschel Walker. So I was wrong. I said in my last video, Herschel Walker is dumb. And this is because he was sending mixed messages around his sort of like abortion situation. So he was seeing some woman and apparently, had an abortion, maybe more than one abortion with her and paid for it. That was the allegation. He both denied it and admitted it at the same time. He was just all over the place and not being clear. Oh, I know her. I don't. I mean, it was just like a very weird communication. So that led me to think, because I hadn't followed him that closely, that he was an idiot or that his team was an idiot. Boy, was I wrong. This man, he, like, even me as a person who's critical of him, he destroyed Warnock the other day in Atlanta at the debate in Georgia. I mean, he annihilated this dude. I mean, go watch the video or whatever for yourself. It's just under an hour. He beats them on everything from foreign policy to voting with Joe Biden 96% of the time, for being pro-abortion, even though he's apparently like a pastor or some man of the cloth, right? For the rising crime, for the destroyed economy, for the fact that we're on the verge of World War III. I mean, he hits them on so many different factors, kicking people out of his church, right? While giving Warnock a place to stay and getting like, I guess he gets like 7,000 plus from his church or something similar to that. So just like tearing this guy down. Herschel was really sharp. He was like very, very quick with it. He was listening really, really carefully. And he kept calling out Warnock for not answering questions, right? He would give these nice, politician type of answers, very Washington. And he just annihilated him. Extreme overperformance, like strongly exceeding expectations. And that's coming from a guy like me who was I had low expectations. I was like, this guy's going to get crushed. Or maybe just barely hold his own. Nope. He is not an idiot. He was able to do that. Anyway, so I'm gonna move this up to NS tier as well. It was a masterful performance. Gives me a little more hope for his candidacy. And I guess Monday is when the folks will hit the polls, and so we'll see what they choose after that. All right. So next up, we gotta talk about M.I.A. So M.I.A. is a rapper. I don't know if you guys follow rap, but she came out with this single back in the day called Paper Planes. It was amazing. I think she did some stuff after that. I didn't really listen to her for a while, but I remember when her single came out, it was like, all I want to do is chum, 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 and take your money. It was like, she was one of the hottest female rappers in, I guess, what was that? Like the mid 2000s or whatever, or 2010s. And really, really good. And apparently she's been red pilled for a while. She's been anti-establishment for a while. Or at least critical of sort of the Western hegemony around this sort of establishment, kind of woke, warmongering, neo corporate, whatever, establishment cabal. And so I'm looking at her Twitter right now. She made the headlines this past week because she's been critical of the $1 billion fine against Alex Jones, right? So she says, look, Alex Jones lying and Pfizer are both lying are both trending, one with penalty, the other without. If you have no critical thinking faculty, this is about as crazy as we should get before a nuclear war wipes out the human race. And she says here, if Alex Jones pays for lying, shouldn't every celebrity pushing vaccines pay too? Very rational comments. And part of this is because not only did Alex Jones get hit for a defamation for like $1 billion this past week, but Pfizer came out and said, oh, actually, we lied as well about vaccine efficacy, blah, 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 or we didn't do testing even though we blah, 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 blah. So she's calling them out. And she's showing very rationally the double standards here and how broken the kind of Western system is around, law and justice, right? The elite globalist cabal can get away with anything at the expense of countless damage and suffering. And this guy who has strong opinions about certain issues, they're trying to destroy his life because they don't want you thinking for yourself or speaking for yourself. So I'm gonna move this one to a B tier. She's like pretty well known. I think she has like 700,000 or so Twitter followers. So she's definitely well known, but she's not as close to the culture right now as in times past. She kind of like, I think she kind of like experimented with some different sounds. I think she became a Christian one time, and like she may or may not as like she's not as culturally like relevant as she has been in time past. But shout out to Brown Girls because I'm actually reminded of back in the day, this woman Noor bin Laden, who's the niece of Osama bin Laden. She came out pretty hard in support of Trump, right? And so she actually protested on Lake Geneva during the Biden and Putin meeting from back in I guess last year in Geneva. And she was waving a Trump one flag, which is crazy. Now she's hardcore red pilled. Like I don't even think M.I.A. is really like red pilled for sure. Like she's probably just more like an independent, like similar to those like protesters who were there. She has critical thinking faculties and the intellectual honesty to like call out BS when she sees it instead of being like a little sheep. But bin Laden is different. This Noor lady, she's actually like hardcore. Like she seems like legit conservative stalwart, and came out as a Trump supporter, and being against 9/11. So just a crazy, simulation, I guess, as they say. All right. So next up, we have to talk about Dearborn. Michigan next. So this one kind of caught my eye. So what happened was some Dearborn Muslims complained about the sexualization of kids in their schools in Dearborn, and so they were joined by this quote unquote Republican rock star. This is from Gateway Pundit, Christina Caramo, who really kind of ignited the crowd there. And it's a really interesting kind of situation here. They come out to this school board. I'm going to go ahead and replay this on mute. They come out to this school board. They're making a fuss. You got the men. I'll say it again. You got the men and the women. But look how many men there are, honestly. You got the men and the women and the parents, and they're pissed off. They're pissed as hell. They're not taking it anymore. They come out in full force, and I got it on mute, but they're actually saying lock them up. Lock them up. So what does that remind you of? Lock them up, right? So this is a rallying cry that used to be said quite a bit around Hillary Clinton by the Trump supporters. So in any other situation, this could easily be a hit piece against them to say, oh, Trump supporting, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, whatever, have come and, protested, they're looking at a dog whistle or whatever they call it. It's hard to do that against Muslims, again, brown-skinned individuals, immigrant individuals who are not of the kind of Judeo-Christian faith tradition. These are one of the, to be honest, in my opinion, at least, kind of a protected status individuals, right? Within the Western tradition, both in Europe and in the U.S. And so this is actually a major development to actually see the Dearborn Muslims actually coming out and getting aggressive at these school boards, and this black woman, Christina Caramo, coming out and supporting them, speaking on behalf of them. So we're seeing this wonderful kind of realignment happen right now in Dearborn, which is a very, very strongly Muslim place in America. And this is associated by some similar kind of themes that we're seeing right now in the country. So last week in North Carolina, this mom, she read from a book that was quote unquote found in her classroom, talking about this same theme of sexualizing children, right? The book is called "This Book is Gay," and it gets into graphic detail about sex acts. I don't want to talk about it here, but this was, I guess, exposed by Libs of TikTok. She says, graphic: a mom reads from the book "This Book is Gay," which was on the recommended reading list for middle schoolers in Charlotte, North Carolina. I guess it was somewhere in North Carolina. This book teaches kids about gay, and encourages the use of blank apps, right? So, and what's devastating for me is it's no wonder here is what the mother says. It's no wonder that 92% of Charlotte Mecklenburg schools graduating seniors aren't college or career ready when you're instructing them on how to give blank and handies instead of teaching them how to add and subtract. So that's crazy, right? Can you imagine 92% of these seniors knowing everything there is to know about LGBTQIS, but having no understanding of math and arithmetic and the English language and stuff like that? So pretty crazy, right? And then to make matters worse, in Virginia recently, there was this Democratic lawmaker who put forward this bill to basically make felony charges against parents for not affirming their child's gender identity. So imagine this. This is purely wrong think and wrong speak again. So I'm just going to look at this paragraph right here. The planned bill by this Democratic lawmaker, so this is Elizabeth Guzman in Virginia, would expand the definition of child abuse to include parents who are not willing to, quote, affirm their child's stated gender identity or sexual orientation, with Guzman telling the outlet that if a child reports such an incident, the job of that mandated reporter is to inform Child Protective Services. Holy crap. So think about that. Your child comes back and says, actually, you thought my name was Charles, but my name is actually Charlotte. You need to call me Charlotte from now on. Otherwise, you're misgendering me. My gender identity is now a female. And you say, hold on a second there. And, can we talk this out? And it's like, no, this is child abuse. I'm going to call the police on you, and maybe they can take your kids away from you. And this is a felony, right? This is a felony charge. So can you imagine if this passes? The agenda is getting really crazy. And there's one interesting thing here at the end, right? And this is why I kind of led with this sort of cult description in the title of this. So she, like the lawmaker, also implied that not affirming the child's gender identity might bar them from getting into heaven, saying, we all have a commitment to God, and for those believers out there, we know that there's a life after life, and there's going to be a conversation between that person and God, and that's what we're after, to go by what the Bible says. Holy crap, man. This is straight blasphemy. That's crazy. That's crazy. So now, it's a true and genuine cult, right? They're trying to manipulate and twist scripture and to align with their ideology and to make it subservient to it, right? And then this actually reminds me of a story from I guess a couple weeks ago now. John MacArthur. So he's like a very prominent Christian pastor out of California, and he wrote a scathing letter to Gavin Newsom about this image that you're seeing here, which is so it's a billboard. So Gavin Newsom paid for like billboards in California, or actually no, it was out of state. I think in Arizona and some other places, basically saying, hey, California is a sanctuary state when it comes to abortions. Come here to get your abortions. We're happy to have you as residents, even though you live out of state. And he used taxpayer money to do that, right? And so the billboard says, need an abortion? California is ready to help. Learn more at abortion.ca.gov. And then it says, using scripture, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater command than these. Mark 12:31. So MacArthur went in on him. He went in on him. He says, in mid-September, you revealed to the entire nation how thoroughly rebellious against God you are when you sponsored billboards across America promoting the slaughter of children whom he creates in the womb. You further compounded the wickedness of that murderous campaign with a reprehensible act of gross blasphemy, quoting the very words of Jesus from Mark 12:31, as if you could somehow twist his meaning and arrogate his name in favor of butchering unborn infants. You use the name and the words of Christ to promote the credo of Moloch. It would be hard to imagine a greater sacrilege. So just a crazy, crazy times that we're in right now. Ultimately, I'm going to give this whole Dearborn and sort of child exploitation scenario using scripture, no less, as an S tier. When you have two demographics stirred up, parents and religious communities, like something's changing in the waters right now, right? And that's also how Glenn Youngkin was brought in, bringing in parents, right, and getting them upset about this. So if you have that, plus the Dearborn Muslims, which really represent kind of both the Islamic community as well as the parents, right, with very traditional, very conservative values, they don't play. They do not play at all. Then something's really changing right now. The movement, it seems to be evolving, and I think it's going to have a big, big impact, and it is having a big impact on the culture war. All right, so next up, I got to mention this whole situation that's happening right now around China, just kind of briefly. I think it's like under discussed, but it's pretty important. So there's this like reporter guy, Jordan Schneider. He says, the U.S. government's new export controls are wreaking havoc on China's chip industry. New rules around U.S. persons are driving an industry-wide decapitation. So this is probably the first time in which Joe Biden has done something that I actually agree with. If someone was to, point a gun at my head and says, say one thing that you like about Joe Biden and what he's done in his presidency, this is probably it right here. So he literally is, even though he pulled back certain Trump sanctions against China, he seems to be creating this new one here, which is destroying China's semiconductor industry. So I'll just read a little bit here. So basically, long story short is, if you are a U.S. citizen who is working on semiconductors in China, you need to quit your job and stop working on semiconductors in China. Otherwise, they can revoke your citizenship or sanction you. Does that make sense? So this is like overnight, I think, as of like this past Friday, destroying China's semiconductor industry. So he says here, this is what annihilation looks like. China's semiconductor manufacturing industry was reduced to zero overnight. Complete collapse, no chance of survival. So that's an interesting one right there. We'll see how this kind of whole trade war, culture war, ideological war, and maybe actual war situation plays out with China. But it is an interesting development. They've been very quiet about this, the Chinese. But from what I'm hearing, this is like just as damaging from a reputational standpoint as when Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan not too long ago. But the difference is that whereas they said a lot of aggressive stuff about Nancy, they haven't said anything about this one yet. I wonder if this comes as a surprise or is hitting them where it really hurts. But it'll be interesting to kind of see and keep tabs on this one as things develop. I'm going to move this into maybe the B category. It doesn't change much from an American standpoint, but when you think about this whole Russia-Ukraine stuff and the whole international relations and where we're at with China and their role in that, it should be interesting to kind of see how that develops. Okay, and so last thing for today. So one big thing happened with climate change. So there's these climate change activists. They basically have defiled Van Gogh's best work, which is this sunflowers painting at the National Gallery. And they actually glued themselves to the wall. What I thought was an interesting twist. So as you can see here, it's got like 45 million views. It was a huge story. Here's what people are not talking about as much, and this is why I wanted to highlight this Paul Graham fellow who kind of brought this up. Yeah, so this was funded, he says, by a group started by 3 rich Americans who became concerned about climate change after their houses in Malibu were threatened by wildfires in 2018. I am not making this up. And then he actually cites the source from back in 2019, which actually like shows and breaks that down. He says 2 are heirs, Getty and Kennedy, and the third was has made a career advising celebrity philanthropists. So this is the California kind of bourgeoisie, the elites, et cetera, et cetera. And this actually comes on the heels of a couple of things, right? You may recall last month at the Laver Cup for Roger Federer's last game, some random mentally ill person set his arm on fire. Didn't have the balls to actually see it all the way through though, so he put the fire out. I guess his integrity for his cause is not complete in total. So anyway, this is one of those climate change weirdos, just like destroying Western civilization to make a statement. And then just recently, what's happened in the UK. At this place, Fortnum and Pickley, you have these other climate change weirdos who are pouring out milk bottles in a store to like make a statement. And the goal is really to, call on the government to support farmers in a transition to a plant-based food system, right? So not milk, right? Plant-based. No harm to animals. So this would be like the vegan way of eating. Hey, humans, you can't eat animals at all in any way, shape, or form. Plant-based only. Now, what I wanted to double click on before we wrap is this whole big oil situation. So here's one of the twisted ironies about this whole story with these little petulant children throwing soup at a Van Gogh painting. So apparently one of the founders here is the granddaughter of an oil magnate. I didn't know this. So this is one of the major donors of this whole movement that's behind this. It's like an activist movement called Just Stop Oil. Okay, so think of the irony there. So the granddaughter, her name is Eileen Getty. Her father made his money in oil, right? He's the Getty Oil founder. So she set up with some of her millions or hundreds of thousands or whatever, Climate Emergency Fund, to basically fund these activists. So she's been working on this since 2019. So we're starting to see this, in my opinion, more and more in like recent years. Makes sense. You have people like her who are so self-loathing. First of all, just look at her. She looks miserable. She looks like she's been in a boxing ring her entire life and lost every single fight and is still fighting. Just looks miserable. This is not how I would think of a multimillionaire heiress of a family fortune. She should look happier than that. But anyway, so she's one of the faces who's actually like behind this whole movement. And I thought it was just interesting. It shows like a level of self-loathing. And the main thing that I just want to say here is like, it would be one thing, I would be open-minded, right, if these people propose alternatives, right? But all they do is propose destruction. So there's like a saying that I think these two activists were saying. They were saying, what was it? Art or life? That's what it was. Art or life? Art or life? You know, I think it's broader than that. I think what's actually happening here is creation or destruction. Creation or destruction. All these people are good at are destroying things. If they were to have just taken the effort to say, how can we harness wind and solar and, I don't know, nuclear or, you know, hydroelectric, whatever they want to do to like create a viable alternatives to oil and gas, I would hear them out. I'd be willing to do it, but they're actually turning more people off. And instead of having a viable alternative and letting the market sort itself out, they're actually just destroying, right, Western civilization as we know it in every way, shape, and form, right? So it's really sad to see, and it shows that we're in this culture war for the long haul. Tons of mentally ill children like this are throwing their lives down the gutter for causes that will only lead to the mass destruction and death of humanity because we're relying on this energy for survival. So very sad to see. Ultimately, I'm going to move this into the S tier as well. Thanks for listening to today's rundown. If you liked what you heard, please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.